All right, well, here we go. More bull.
I 1000% agree with this comment. If that man is your soulmate, if that man loves you the way he says he does, if that man says that he wants to marry you and have a family, why is he waiting so long? Why does he have so many excuses? All of the excuses that are like, oh, a ring is too expensive. Oh, a wedding is too expensive. Oh, we can't afford that right now. I don't want to do that right now. Blah, blah, blah. Those are excuses. Just because you get engaged doesn't mean you have to get married right away. But at least you have that commitment and that show that you do want to marry.
Once again, it's the same trend over and over and over again. You are entitled to something constantly. I guess deep in our body somewhere, obviously, there's always going to be a resistance to settling down as a guy. Always. You're always going to fight that resistance. The only guys that don't fight that resistance are guys that are naturally very feminine, right? For being honest. Because they'll make a bunch of excuses for it. They're going to say something like, "Oh, but God wanted it this way," regardless of which one, or "Oh, it's the right thing to do." Like they'll make all those excuses, but the truth is they're just feminine, right? Feminine men don't have a problem with commitment. Masculine men do, because masculine men understand that committing fully is a massive responsibility. And there's a timing to this because we're trying to orchestrate our life, plan our life a certain way. And a lot of times we're not even sure if that girl is the correct girl. So yeah, it's always going to be this thing as a guy, right? You're always going to feel that you're not going to want to do it if you're masculine, right? Because there's never going to be this ideal girl that comes into your world and makes you feel like, oh yeah, this is the perfect woman, I'm going to marry her. There's just a point in time where you sort of decide, yeah, I should. And when you kind of enter into that phase, you start to screen them a little bit differently. And then you get to a point where it's good enough. And then that's when you go through that process. But other than that, in any other context, there's always going to be some level of resistance. Always. But girls just feel entitled. Maybe there's a chance that this girl just doesn't provide that much value, right? So if he's resisting, the question is never, what about me? Am I not doing enough? It's always he's not valuing me enough, but it's never, am I providing enough value? That's what I find so incredibly amazing about every single video that I've pretty much posted at this point. It's always the guy's fault every single time. Every single time. It's never my fault. You guys have to be picking up on this pattern by this point. It's always the same. Every single time.
Her. And this comment was on a video that I made talking about girls who were complaining about having babies with their significant other, but their significant other isn't proposing, isn't marrying them. Especially after having a baby, you would think that that man would be quick to propose.
So once again, projection of female standards and female desires onto men, okay? For us, all these things are very compartmentalized, okay? The marriage zone is a very specific zone, and all these other zones are their own categories. So we can still like a woman and have kids with her and all these things, but the savage truth about it is that unless that girl fits this standard that we have truly in our hearts, we're not going to be that inclined to marry them. We're just not going to, okay? In the end of the day, right, marriage is supposed to be a contract under God, right? It's a religious concept. It's not a government concept. This became a government concept after the fact for whatever reason. Well, we can think of a couple, but I'm not going to bring them up in this video. The point is, though, that is reserved for very specific situations in a guy's mind, right? I just love, once again, how women are projecting that onto guys. Like, oh, you have a kid with me, so you must want to get married, right? Unfortunately, no. That's not necessarily how it works. The kid pops in, you take on the responsibility, but it still doesn't mean that you want to fully fulfill that. Now you may ask yourself, oh, but if you're a guy, why would you put yourself through that? Well, truth is, a lot of guys are pretty lazy, right? They get a girl, she's good enough, she comes into your life moves on, you're there, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, things happen. But in the back of your mind, you always have reservations about going all the way. You always have this little bit of resistance. So you might have a whole full-fledged family with this woman, but you're still not going to want to go and do that formalization process, right? That's sort of that's just the reality of it. It is what it is.
Me, it's a red flag if he isn't, because how is a marriage more commitment than a whole child?
It is a huge commitment because once you sign that contract, you essentially own him, especially by a modern standard, right? As a modern woman, you really don't have to do that much and you get a lot. For a guy, it's signing off a permanent lease agreement. And so you're also signing an agreement where the option, like you never get another woman in your life ever again, ever. A lot of people are going to start to claim, oh, that's not important, all this stuff. You guys can say that. Like there's certain guys that will say that and pretend and, play moral superiority, or they'll play holier than thou and all this stuff. But it's not that simple because a lot of guys simply don't have the sheer options. They get what they can, right? But just because they get what they can and they have something doesn't mean that that's exactly what they want. So marriage for them is sort of formalizing this process that, oh yeah, you're exactly what I want. That's why I'm going to sign this contract. But in the end, deep down, it's probably not exactly what they wanted. And now this is where this whole red flag issue that she's bringing up comes into play, right? Marriage is more commitment than a child, because a child, for the first 10 years of its life, being around it all the time as a dad isn't going to really provide that much value. Like the child needs the mom early on way more, right? And a lot of dads report this too. When the kid's crying early on and the dad tries to comfort the child doesn't get as comforted. When the woman comes, the child feels better. Like a lot of dads report this, that they're just second place, especially in the early phases. So yeah, from a dad's perspective, I mean, it really makes a lot of sense, right? You're in there, you create the kid, and yeah, you're around, but you're not necessarily the top guy at that time in the kid's life. When it comes to marriage, though, you're essentially forced into parting ways with everything that you own, or at least half of it, in some cases more. So yeah, marriage is a bigger commitment. It is what it is.
And for those men who are like, oh, we can't afford it, it's too expensive, how can you afford a child then?
A child isn't that expensive as you guys make it, okay? A child is not expensive as people make it, especially not in the early phases. You don't need to go to the store and buy a child Louis Vuitton shoes that they're going to outgrow in 2 months, okay? It's not that expensive. So when moms are talking about how expensive it is to have a child, it's not. And also, a child is a genuine product, if you think about it, right? I know it sounds weird to put it this way, so understand the point I'm trying to make here. A child is a genuine product, right? It's a product of your, let's call it ability or competency, right? Marriage is a societal construct. You can make the argument, oh, but I'm religious and I believe in marriage. Okay, well, that's a little bit different, so I'll leave that to the side. Most people now in the secular world, right, they get married in the eyes of the state. That is a societal construct. That has nothing to do with spirituality or any of the original intentions behind marriage. So why would you sign this contract as a guy? The only marriage that makes sense is spiritual marriage. Marriage in the eyes of the government makes zero sense because in a lot of places now, even the tax benefits are reduced, right? Not all places, of course, in the West, but a lot of places in the West, place where I live, there is a lot less benefits now from an income perspective, even when it comes to marriage than it was in the past. Really, as a guy, all you're doing is signing a piece of paper that gives a woman the utmost absolute feeling of security, and at that point with no responsibility, honestly. Because even if she doesn't fulfill her obligation or responsibility in that marriage, she will still get the majority, right? She will still get the majority of the value, because it's not like this woman didn't go earn that value, okay? She got with the guy because likely he was a valuable guy and could bring value to the table. This is the more likely outcome. So when she leaves, she takes more than she actually earned, pretty much every time. So this idea that marriage benefits men it's completely delusional. It doesn't make any sense. So the fact that some girl feels entitled to marriage because she's with whatever is sort of stupid. There's plenty of reasons to be a little bit weary of marriage, okay? The only marriage, like I said, that makes sense is a religious marriage. Everything else is purely just playing. You're playing house. You're playing into the societal game. You're playing into the social construct because maybe you get some status out of it, or you want to feel like you're playing that whole fantasy game, right? But it really isn't that reflective of what the original purpose of marriage was in the first place. This is why divorce rates are going up. The core reason why people are getting married isn't correct. If it was, they wouldn't be getting divorced. If you like this video, like and subscribe. If you want to see more of my private content, click the link in the description below.